title gets turned around. Jesus is the Son of God, who is God the Son. He is the second person of the Trinity. He is God, and He is the Son. God in Himself. And when Jesus feels the rod that mortals use, it's not for His own sin, but for ours. Here in Jesus, we see that God enters time and humanity and takes our place. But the second thing that this screams out to me is the super abundant giving of the faithful God. You see, we don't give like this. We give on condition. I will love you if you love me. I will be nice to you if you are nice to me. I will give you time, I will give you money, I will give you all of these things if you return it to me in some fashion. You listen to me, you drive me home, you spend the rest of your life, whatever. We don't give unconditionally. In 2 weeks we're going to talk about David's horrific sin. And we know about it, we almost don't need to talk about it, but we will, because we do need to. Why didn't God remove David from kingship like He removed Saul? Because God had a promise to David. God made a specific promise to David. 2 Samuel 7. God says, I will never remove my love from your family. When there is a king in Jerusalem, it is the son of David, even when things go badly. And God is not obligated to make this promise, but He does it because He wants to. Now, there's more going on here. There is the fact that God is a promise-making and promise-keeping God. It goes back to Abraham, it goes back to Noah, it goes back to Genesis 3. That God promises all these things. And he doesn't make these promises because we are worthy. He doesn't make the promises because David's a good guy. David says in 1 Chronicles 22, God didn't want me to build the temple because there is blood on my hands. And it's not all good. David is going to start things up very, very badly. And he is going to show himself to be thoroughly sinful. And yet God in His mercy will turn to David with compassion and mercy, because that is the promise that He has made, and that is the God that He is. Now, where do we go with this? Firstly, we need to always remember the faithfulness of God, the love of God. He is far more faithful than you or I will ever be. Trust me on this one. He keeps His promises, even if we think that they are impossible. And there are promises that God has made to us. What about, I will never leave you, I will never forsake you? What about, I will hear your prayers? What about, I love you that much? You know, sometimes we forget these things. Sometimes we forget, in the midst of our busyness or our bleakness, the love of the superabundant, promise-keeping God. We need to remember those promises. Secondly, we need to open our eyes up and see that God is very, very big. God responds to David in this part of the Bible, and in His response He sets the way for the salvation of people 3,000 years later. We know that this has always been God's plan, that He planned it from before the beginning of time. But He sets it out for us so that we can see it. From the second king of Israel, we see God's plan is for Jesus to be the King of all kings. Do you have any questions? Yeah, mate.
When you said that he made Solomon like a son,
Yes.
that puts him as almost God, but not quite.
Yeah.
Where does that put him in heaven in comparison to God?
I would never want to speculate on the salvation of someone who's been dead for 3,000 years. I don't know. Solomon's an interesting character because of his idolatry. So, did Solomon truly trust in God? I don't know. Solomon's the wisest man who ever lived, and yet he's also radically foolish. And I don't want to say, thank you for bringing that up. I don't want to say that, okay, King of Judah, tick, you're in heaven, or tick, you're almost God. Because if you go through 1 and 2 Kings, there's some doozies. There's some real doozies. Manasseh. Manasseh's dad was Hezekiah. So yeah, there's some massively big issues with the sons of David. But this promise is made with actually Jesus in mind. And all of the sons of David who are really messed up, right? They all highlight Jesus' goodness because they are so messed up. Okay, so these guys, even though they're the Son of God, in the king sense, are just, really bad. But you get to Jesus and you go, he is so unlike these guys. He is so good. He is so giving, etc.
Yeah.
So.
In verse 12,
Yeah.
is offspring singular or plural?
You need to ask the Hebrew scholar, but I believe offspring's a word.
Nothing.
I believe that offspring is a word that it doesn't actually have a plural. You don't say offsprings, right? So, but in Galatians, Paul goes, he speaks of seed, singular, not seeds, plural, which as far as I can tell, you can't make that claim except Paul as the apostle can. I'm not the apostle, so I'm not going to make a claim on that. Just so you know, but let me reread that. I'll raise up your offspring after you, who shall come forth from your body, and I will establish his kingdom. The second half of it is his, singular. So I would say singular. I would say the context says singular. And I think the immediate is Solomon. So, Solomon is going to be raised up. Solomon's going to build the house. Solomon's kingdom is going to stick around in Judah for as long as there is a Judah. But that's the foreshadowing. The actual arrival of that promise is obviously Jesus. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I just heard people say that this is the bit where God's like pretty much pointed to Jesus like that.
Yeah. I think he does. I think he does point to Jesus like that. But you've got to understand that he also points to Solomon. So the Old Testament prophecies work like that. Sometimes, on occasion, they only point to Jesus. Isaiah 53 can't be speaking of anyone else. Literally can't be speaking of anyone else. But you read through, these things where God's talking about an immediate and a future. You've got to get both of them in place.